Good evening. Today I will present about completing the square, which is also known as CTS. First, I will give a brief topic overview. Then I will explain some of the vocabulary words you need to know in order to understand what is completing the square. After that, I will give a step-by-step explanation, and then I will give 4 examples, and finally the conclusion. CTS is a method used by many people to solve a quadratic expression. But in order to understand how to do so, you need to know the meaning of roots, 0, and x-intercept. And these 3 words have the same meaning, which is a solution to an equation. Now I will explain step by step. In the beginning, it's gonna sound very confusing, I know that, but it's gonna make more sense when we apply the step-by-step process to the examples. So first of all, you need to make sure the equation is in the standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. But the real question is how? So you should subtract or add terms so the expression can be in the standard form. After that, you should move the c value to the right side of the equation, and then add a parenthesis to the left side, this being ax squared plus bx. Then divide b value by 2 and square it. But don't forget that you need to add the answer of b divided by 2 to the power of 2 to the right side of the equation to keep it balanced. Then you need to add the c value with b divided by 2 to the power of 2, and this will give you your new final answer. Then you need to add a square root to both of the sides, this being the left and the right side, but the only difference is that you need to add a plus and negative sign, a positive and a negative sign to the right side of the equation. After that, once that is done, you just need to solve for the variable. Now I will give you 4 examples, 2 easy ones and 2 harder ones. Here we have an easy example. We're trying to solve for x. X squared plus 2x minus minus 120. So as you can see, this equation is in standard form. So we need to move c value to the right side. So it's going to end up being x squared plus 2x equals 120. Then we need to add a parenthesis to the left side. So it's going to be x plus 2x equals 120. Then divide 2x by 2. 2x divided by 2 equals 1. So we end up having this. X plus 1 squared equals 120 plus 1. But now you must be wondering, why 120 plus 1? Because we need to divide b by 2. We did that, 2x divided by 2, which equals 1. And then you need to square this value. So 1 times 1 equals 1. Since you're adding it to the left side, you need to make sure to add it to the right side so the equation keeps balanced. So 120 plus 1 equals 121. Then you simply add a square root to both sides, and don't forget to add a plus and minus sign to the right side, like this. And since 120 is a perfect square, you can simplify it, which is 11. So you get square root of x plus 1 squared equals plus or minus 11. And don't forget that square roots and power of 2, they cancel each other since they're opposite. So you simply end up having x plus 1 equals plus or minus 11 minus 1. And you're doing it minus 1 since you're trying to solve for x. This meaning you're trying to isolate x. So you subtract 1 from the left side, so you also need to do that on the right side. So your final answer is x equals 10 or x equals negative 12, because minus 11 minus 1 equals minus 12, and plus 11 minus 1 equals 10. Now we're gonna do the second example, which is a pretty easy one too. The equation is x squared minus 10x minus 18 equals 0. Here we're also trying to solve for x. And notice once again that the equation is in standard form. But now we need to move c value to the right side. So we end up having x squared minus 10x equals 18. We divide b value by 2. So we have negative 10x divided by 2, like this, which equals negative 5. So we end up having this. And since we need to multiply half of b value by half of b value, in this case being negative 5 times negative 5, we also need to add it to the right side to make sure the equation keeps balanced. So we added 25 to the right side because negative 5 times negative 5 equals 25. Now we add 18 to 25, which equals 43. We then add a square root to both sides, and don't forget to add a plus or minus sign to the right side of the equation, like this. And once again, you can just cancel the square root with the power of 2 since they're opposite. And since 43 isn't a perfect square, we just leave it like that. Then we try to solve for x. So we do x equals 5 equals plus or minus square root of 43 plus 5, because in order to isolate x, it may just subtract to add 5 to both sides of the equation, and that's our final answer. X equals 5 plus or minus square root of 33. Easy, right? Now things get a little bit more complicated, since on the next two examples, the value that is squared, it doesn't have a coefficient of 1. It has a coefficient higher than 1, this being 2 or something above. In this equation, we're trying to solve for y. So for 4y squared minus 4y equals 9. We have two ways that we can solve this, method 1 and method 2. This method, we're dividing everything by 4. So 4y squared minus 4y divided by 4 and 9 divided by 4 ends up being y squared minus y equals 9 over 4. Then you simply do the things that we did on the previous examples. So we do negative 1 divided by 2, which equals negative half. Then you square negative half, which equals 1/4. So you add 1/4 to the right side of the equation, like this. After that, you do 9/4 plus 1/4, which ends up being 10/4, like this. And then you just add a square root to both sides. Two things. Once again, you just cancel the square root with the power of 2. And since 4 is a perfect square, you can simplify that. So you end up having y minus half equals plus or minus square root of 10 over 2. Then you try to solve for y, so you isolate y. So you end up having these two answers. Y equals 1 negative square root of 10 over 2, or y equals 1 plus square root of 10 over 2. That's the first method, so you divide everything by 4. The second method is by factoring. Here we have the same equation. In this method, you need to factorize. So the common factor in this case is 4. So you do 4 parentheses y squared minus y equals 9. Then you basically do the same steps. So you divide negative 1 by 2, which equals negative half. So you end up having 4 parentheses y squared minus half parentheses equals 9. Then you square this. You square negative half. Negative half times negative half equals negative 0.25, which is 1/4. But instead of just adding negative 0.25 to the right side of the equation, you need to do 1/4 times 4. So you do 4 times 1/4. 4 times 1/4 equals 1. Then you just add 9 plus 1, which equals 10. You end up having this. Now you simply add the square root to both sides of the equation, and don't forget about the plus and minus sign on the right side of the equation. Since 4 is a perfect square, you end up having 2 parentheses y minus negative half squared equals square root of 10. So you end up having this, as I said. Then you simply solve for y. But in order to do that, you need to first do the FILE method with the left side of the equation. So you have 2y minus 1 equals plus or minus square root of 10. Then you simply solve for y. So you need to add 1 to both sides of the equation. So you have 2y equals plus or minus square root of 10 over 1, and then you simply divide everything by 2. So you end up having 1 plus or minus square root of 10 over 2. And your final answer will be y equals 1 plus square root of 10 over 2, or y equals 1 minus square root of 10 over 2. That's it. The fourth example is a little bit complicated, just like this one, but the only difference is that we're going to deal with imaginary numbers. The equation is 9n squared plus 79 equals 18n. You can notice that the equation is not in its standard format, so we need to make sure that we put it in the standard formula. So we subtract 18n from the right side. So we will have 9n squared minus 18n equals negative 79, since we need to pass the c value to the right side of the equation. Then I'm gonna do this one with this second method, so this would be by factoring. So I'm gonna end up having 9 parentheses n squared minus 2n parentheses equals negative 79. Then I'm gonna divide 2n by 2, which is gonna equal 1. So I'm gonna have 9 parentheses n minus 1 squared equals negative 79. Then I do minus 1 times minus 1, which equals 1. So I add this to the right side of the equation, but I don't add only 1. I need to add 9 times 1. 9 times 1 equals 9. So I do negative 79 plus 9, which equals negative 70. Then I add a square root to both sides of the equation, and we can't forget to put the plus or minus sign on the right side of the equation, like this. And since 9 has a perfect square, we end up having 3 parentheses n minus 1, because we canceled the power of 2 with the square root, and since 70 doesn't have a perfect square, we just stick to this. But don't forget that you can't have a negative square root, so we're going to use imaginary numbers. First of all, you need to add 3 to both sides of the equation, so you can stay with 3n. We're going to end up having this. 3n equals 3 plus or minus square root of negative 70. But we need to divide everything by 3. So we have 3 plus or minus negative square root of 70 over 3. But since we can't have a negative square root, we're going to use imaginary number. So we're going to end up having 3 plus or minus I square root of 70 over 3. And we can cancel 3 or 3. So we end up having as our final answer plus or minus I square root of 70. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys now have a better understanding on how to complete a square.